Okay, we can begin by examining what we have done before. So, as you realized, in the past couple of weeks, we have been looking at static pages, which means we've been creating the pages dynamically, statically, applying styles to them, and that kind of a thing. So, the content of the page, or the pages rather, were not actually changing. So we now want to move a step further and make sure that now our pages become interactive, which means that the user can interact with them just like they interact with other applications. And that introduces us to something called JavaScript. So JavaScript is a programming language that is the father of the internet. It's the one that gives the internet the capability to do the things that you're able to do online. Even AI that we are currently using, all this is powered by JavaScript or a subset of JavaScript in one or another. Of course, at the end of the day, all of them are going to be transpiled back to JavaScript, even if you're using a library like React, Vue, Angular, you name them. So all of them will just TypeScript, all of them will just transpile back to JavaScript. So JavaScript is a very important language to know about. Now, unlike other languages, JavaScript is what we are calling um, uh, an interpreted language. You see, in programming, there are two types of codes. So we have compiled languages and interpreted languages. Compiled languages are things like Windows or Windows app, the things that you compile, then you get an installer, then you use that installer to install executable files, then you execute those executable files. An example is something like Excel. On the screen here is a compiled language, so I had to install Excel into my computer so that I'm able to use Excel. So that's a compiled program. Then we have a translated program. In a translated program, the execution of the program is executed one line after a time. So if you go to the browser, for example, anything that comes to from the internet is actually um, um, an interpreted language, which means that the code will come, download onto your browser, then from there you'll be able to now go ahead and execute one line at a time until you execute the entire piece of code. And that is actually how JavaScript has been designed. Now, JavaScript has had several versions over the past couple of years, and of course, the version that is interested in is what we call ES5 and or ECMAScript 5 and ES6. ECMAScript 5 came sometime I think in 2008. ECMAScript 6 came in 2015. That is being used today. So we're going to use ECMAScript both 5 and 6, but I'm going to focus on ES6 most of the time when we are writing this particular code. So there are various versions of JavaScript, but I'm going to focus on only those two, ES5 and ES6. So with ES6, you'll find this ES6 2015, ES6 2017, 2018, 2019, all the way to 2025. Or 2026 if they release a new version. So basically, from 2015 moving forward, JavaScript have been available, ECMAScript, something which is basically as they continually add elements of the language like API access, like storage and location and maybe a camera or things like that. So it is the standard that is actually being updated, and then the browser manufacturers will implement those changes so the browser can be able to effectively apply those changes that have been suggested by ECMAScript and ECMAScript. So that's very, very important. So those are the various versions of JavaScript that we have. Now, why use JavaScript? This is very important. So I just put it over here. Why use JavaScript? Very important. JavaScript, first thing is it enables us to what we call interactive web pages. This means that I can be able to show things to a user, do some sort of animation, and all of that stuff. So it basically makes the page engaging, so to speak, not static as we were saying before. So it achieves this in several ways. One of the ways that it achieves this is it allows us to perform what we call animations. So perform animations. So you can perform animations with JavaScript, like you can do transformations, you can move text from left to right, you can rotate a few things. So the same any ways you can perform animations in JavaScript, and also to see how it works. It also allows us to perform form validation. So form validation, when a user inputs data or comment on a form, you can check if they are providing the correct things. And if they are not providing the correct things, then probably what you could do is to just tell them they're not providing the correct thing, let's focus on those form and software and so forth. Then it also allows us to remain to fetch the data. So JavaScript is very powerful. It has what we call the fetch API. It has a fetch API that allows us to be able to fetch data from a remote location on a remote server and use them within our page. That's very powerful because the browser and the database are going to be seated at different locations, and for that, you should access the content of the web of the database server from the web portal, which is actually one of the applications called super powers. Then it also allows us to allows access of device components like camera, storage, Bluetooth, um, uh, location by API. So it allows us to do this. So just short text. It allows us to be able to access components of the devices. Things like the camera, you can use JavaScript to access camera, to access storage, to access Bluetooth, and also to access location services. Like you want to know where a person is located and all that, you can be able to access that via JavaScript. So these are some of the ways that it is able to give us interactivity as far as our web pages are concerned. So we're going to see how that works out. Now, how do we use JavaScript within our files? Now, there are two main ways that you can use JavaScript. Okay, there are two main ways that you can use JavaScript within your 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 application. One is to use the script tag and of course add the scripts within your page. The other one is of course using an external page, which is the place where you just like we were using CSS. So the same case applies inside here. So now, let's see how we can be able to add JavaScript into our application and start seeing how we can be able to do it. Okay, so I'll open it first. I'll probably have it on the left. Then I'll have my browser on the right, of course. That's where I'm going to test my application. Then I will open it here. Reasons. Yeah, I think the folder that we were working with, I'm assuming, but I can close this other windows. I will leave it open. So we're in just over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a file here and call it JS11. Not actually a file, I need a folder here for JS11. 101, JavaScript 101. So here I'll have JS welcome.html. So this is where we're going to put our JavaScript. So I simply say welcome to JavaScript. So I use JS to mean JavaScript most of the time. And this should be welcome, yeah, something like that. So of course I can run this on the browser, and the only thing I'm going to see is up here, it's going to say welcome to JS. That's probably the only thing not on this. And that's very important. That's very, very important for us to be able to get started with JavaScript. So as I said, there's so many ways you can use JavaScript on the page. One, you can use a script tag. Let me just pump this one up a bit. Let me just bump this font up a bit. Control plus plus. I think that's more visible, so we can also increase the font size of this. Maybe I think that's okay. So I said we can use the script tag like that and input all our script inside here. So if you wanted to use, if you wanted to put something on the set, this is how to use it. Then there is how to output. So when it comes to output, there's so many ways you can output. So one, you can do what you call document your try. Document your try will output the content of the script here. So I can say something like document is right. Then I simply say welcome to Javascript like that. So you can see now it has output of this thing on the window without me putting it inside the code. And this is actually how Javascript becomes powerful because I can actually update the portion of DOM on the document of the model without actually rendering the entire page. I can only update a portion of the page, and that works out very well. Let me just give you an example. So if I have something like your name here, so I have your name there, and I have a span with an ID of name here, and right now it's blank, so I'll simply say Robert. But when the page loads, I want to simply replace this name. Or if I have a button here, something like this, I'll say change name, and here I'll give you an ID of change name, something like that. So I have this button here where I could put there, one of them. Yeah, that's okay. Maybe here I could put a span or a break like that. So you can see your name is Robert. Then you can change your name if you want to do something else. So what I'll do here, I'll simply say document dot query selector, and so we're running the CSS selectors, the same CSS selectors we're using on CSS, we can use them on JavaScript. When you change that part in the it's not like that. So if you look at this code, what I'm basically done here is saying, when the document loads, of course, I'm going to put this extra text on the screen. So it will include the text that was there, then add something else on the screen. And on the new name, I'll simply give it a fixed value. Say, instead of positive, let me say, put something like Terry, right? So when I do this, so when this gets loads, you can see it's really low. When I click on this, you can see whatever it's saying, right? So you can see I've actually changed this portion of the page without necessarily loading the entire page. And that is the whole sense of why we want to use JavaScript. We want to be able to make the page interactive, we want to be able to change some portion of the page, we want to animate some portion of the page, we want to perform form validation and things like that without necessarily refreshing the page over and over again. And that's the kind of interactivity or the applications that you have in this one. So if you go to your inbox, Gmail will only just update when an email comes in. It's not going to like render the entire page. The portions of the page that are going to be rendered, but not refreshing the entire page for purposes of extracting and displaying images that come from you. So that point here was how to use script, and I was more or less concerned with using the script tag over here. And with the script tag, there are various ways you can do output, and one of them I was saying is document the try. So this is not just an example of just saying for you how exactly JavaScript performs the animation without necessarily refreshing the page. So now, the other way to output text is using what we call console.log. You can use console.log, and you're going to use this a lot. And I can simply say here, welcome to yes console. So something like that. So if I open this and I come to I right click, go to inspect, then this is normal. Then I come to console over here. You'll see I have put welcome to JS in console. So this is another way of outputting just a console. You can do ultimate and right. or you can do console.log depending on what you want to do. Mostly console.log is for logging errors and trying to see which errors are there and see how they can be fixed and that kind of thing. So that is this is one way of using JavaScript. You put script, then you output all the scripts that you have within the script tag. Just like we're using the style tag for CSS. So anything put inside the style tag is applicable to the entire page or the entire page or file that you are currently working on. Same applies to the script. Whatever you put here is accessible to the entire page for us. So that's what we're doing now. The other way for doing this is using what we call an external file. You can also use JavaScript with an external file, which is the most recommended way because sometimes what happens is that you um, you want to share this file across multiple pages, maybe their validation, their validation functions, their data fetching functions, and things like that. So you really like to have them on a separate document so that you can, every time you're getting a document, you can just import them directly without taking any settings. So that's where now we come with the external file. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to create a folder here, and I'm going to call it JS. Then inside that JS, I'm going to simply put a new file and say JS11.js or JavaScript. So you can see when if you want to use the if you want to use the just hold on just a second. Hello? Lakini nasema nasema ukaaga sawa simu. Okay, sorry about that. I think we can carry on. So, as I was saying, we can still be able to use an external JavaScript file, and this is the most recommended way to go about this. Because what happens is that you might want to share files across JavaScript code across multiple pages, just like before we did with CSS. So, this external file is what will work best for us. So, I created JavaScript file, JavaScript folder, and then I created a JavaScript file here. So, now here, what you're going to do is we're just going to run plain JavaScript. So, for example, if you want to output some attributes on the window from external file, I'll simply come in here and say document retrieve welcome JavaScript on one. Then now you'll see it doesn't work because ideally I'm not changing anything. But when I come here and I increase that file like this, I'll say script. But now I use the source here, this source file, and I'll say go inside the JavaScript folder, then inside there, here is this JS11. So when I do that, now you can see it has actually added welcome to JS11. So what I can do here is probably maybe for this, I can add a break so that it's a separate line like that. Well, yeah, well, that didn't work. I don't know why that didn't work, but let me try it here. Break, break. Yeah, yeah. So I don't know. I think probably it's because these would have been the DOM would have updated with this. So I guess I need to change things to spell it correctly as that. So you can see this is welcome JavaScript on one coming from the external JavaScript file, as you can see over here. So somebody is complaining about something on the chat. Nothing, okay? So yeah, so that's how you can use an external file where you is done. So I'll only put JavaScript inside the external file, then I'll just link the external file to the page, and everything else should work as a so if I also look on this, you probably see that
Hello,
I have
excuse
this.
me, sir.
Go ahead. Somebody's asking something.
Yeah, sir, you're actually not clear.
Oh, I'm not clear. How about now?
Yeah, you're not clear. Yeah,
Even at the moment, I'm not clear.
yeah, and also you're too fast, huh?
Mm, too fast. Okay. I think I'm slower than usual. Can you hear me now? Because
Yes.
I'm actually having headphones on my ears and the microphone is on my mouth. So uh, I was assuming that would make it much clearer.
Yeah, now you're actually clear. About the code,
Hmm.
try going a little slow. You actually understand what you're actually saying. The code names you're writing over there.
Hmm.
You actually understand what they mean and such. Okay.
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 All right. Okay. So I'll try to be slow, but we have a lot to cover. So this is us just getting started. So I think well, I'll try to be the slowest I can. I'll try to be the slowest I can. But ideally, I think what I've just introduced is what is JavaScript? Why do we use it? Versions that are there, and now we're at the portion where we're looking at how do we actually use it? Of course, we have looked at how we can output it, either using document.write or console.log, and of course now how to use it. Either you use a script tag or use a script tag with a source, and then you introduce that external file, which is a source file, into your current HTML page, and that becomes execute. I think that's basically what we have covered so far, and I hope that is very, very clear. Okay, so comments. So you're also allowed to have comments in JavaScript. Actually, I've implemented comments over here, only that probably maybe you didn't realize. So we can also put comments in JavaScript. So comments are the portions of code that you don't want to execute. So they could be comments to explain what you're trying to do, to show who the author is, and that kind of thing. Or they could be blocking some portion of code so that it does not work out. So either way, you will put them as comments. So comments can be put in two ways. One, you can use the double slash sign for a single line comment. Single line comment. So if you want to put a single line comment, use a double slash. So for example, what you could do is, and by the way, that's very strange because that was not supposed to, oh, that's inside body. That's not inside script. So this one is supposed to be inside a script. So I just cut it, come to my script here, and I press it here. So you'll see this portion does not appear anywhere on the page, but it's actually there. So if I was to open these sources and come to JS and come to that, you can see the line is actually inside there, but does not output anywhere on the browser. So that's the difference between that. That's how a single line comment works. So if you wanted to put a single line or you want to mark multiple lines, then apply single line comments, then you do that. There's the other option of using multi-line comment. This allows you to be able to apply comment on multiple lines. Sorry. This allows you to apply comments in multiple lines. So you can have as many lines as possible. The star is not a must. This is not a must. This is not a must. This is not a must. What is must is only the start one and the ending one. So if you want to put a multi-line comment, like maybe I want to explain this program, what it does, the parameters, and that kind of a thing, then these comments would come in very, very handy. They're useful because in future you might want to, you might want to, you might come and revisit your code, and you want to understand exactly what was going on inside there. So comments would be a great deal. So I could put maybe the author here. Maybe my name is that. Then maybe I could say the parameters. If it's a function, we will discuss functions. Then I'll put the parameters there. Then explain what they are. Then I can put the expected output, something like that. And not many other things. So when I do this, maybe I can specify the algorithm that I used for whatever reason. It all depend on, it will really depend on exactly what you want to output. But at the end of the day, we just talked about a multi-line comment. So everything between forward slash and star and forward slash will be treated as comments, which can expand more than a single line. So that is how we put comments inside JavaScript. Okay. Now, another thing about JavaScript is what we call variables. Variables. So JavaScript has variables. Variables. So variables are basically placeholders for storing values inside memory. Memory. So variables are placeholders which store values that you're working on inside memory. So just like any other programming language, whenever you want to work with something, you would declare it as a variable. Now in JavaScript, we have three ways that we can define variables, methods for defining variables. We have methods for defining variables to JavaScript. The first one is the var keyword. when you say var then name, you can actually omit this value, and that will still be able to work. So you can say var name, then you can come and say here name is equals to John, something like that. That will still be able to work. Or you can define the variable and assign it a value immediately. That is also another option. So this is one way of assigning variables to JavaScript. Now, in this particular case, you'll find that this I have console.log this value. So it means if I go to my console, I should be able to see John because I've defined a variable name. I have assigned it to John. Then I will put the name, which is I want to put the value of that particular variable. So this is one way of doing it. Now, the thing about variables, uh, properties, variable properties. So properties, properties of var. Variables have various properties. Now, one, they are scope based. They have what we call scope, and of course for scope, sorry. So they have a functional scope, which means when you declare them within a scope, they're only going to be used within that scope. If you declare them outside scope, it means that all the functions inside the page will be able to access it. So let me just undo this. Okay, so there is that. So scope is very important. When you declare a variable inside a function, we're going to look at functions later. It can only be accessed within that function and cannot be accessed outside the function. But once you declare it at the document level, like this name John over here, this will be accessible for all the functions within your current page. Then there's what we call hoisting. Hoisting means that you can't be able to use the variable before you give it a value. Let me give you an example. I declare, um, I'll comment this, but let me just put a new one down here. Let me declare a variable called var, not car, var age, and I'll give it a value. And then I simply say console.log age. Now, of course, I'm expecting to see undefined here. Undefined in JavaScript means that you have defined a variable, but you have not given it a value. But when I come down here and I say age is 30, then you'll see it outputs the undefined. But if I output it again, now it has a value called 30. So here, at this point, it's undefined. At this point, it is 30. So it means that the variable can be used even before you instantiate it. That's what hoisting means. You can declare a variable, use it with before you instantiate it or before you assign a value to it. That's a not so nice thing when it comes to programming because it introduces other problems for your code. So that way, you might not want to use it for that particular reason. It's an older way of doing it. Of course, we are going to see how currently it's being done. Then the good thing with var is that you can redeclare a variable. So for example, I can declare var here, then I can come here and redeclare it. Redeclare it and give it a new value. What's going on? Redeclare it and give it a new value, and that will still be able to work. So you can see I declared age, I output it, then I redeclared it again, and that actually allows me to work. Now these two things, hoisting and redeclaration, are the problems that we had with var data types. And of course, as you open with more and more data, you realize that this is not very scalable and it introduces you to a lot of logical errors. So they dropped the var thing and introduced other things altogether. So we need to look at the second way that we can be able to define our variables. So the second way to define variables is using the let keyword. So you can define variable using the let keyword. So let is just like var, as you can see, and let city is equal to New York. When I output, it will be New York. Now, the only thing about let, unlike variables, is one, you cannot declare the variable. You can also not hoist the variable, but it is scoped just like var, which means if you declare it on top of your page, everything inside your document or your page will access it. If you declare it within a function, only things within the only elements within the function will be able to accept it and so forth and so forth. So when it comes to properties of let, it has a block scope just like var, but no hoisting and no declaration. So you cannot hoist it, which means I cannot say city, then I don't give it a value, then I try to use it. You will see, actually, I don't know why it's given me undefined. Usually it's supposed to give me an error. Uh, Most of the time, it should give me an error that I'm trying to use a variable that has not been declared. So that John undefined 30 undefined. Okay, John undefined 30 undefined. Yeah, so this still give me undefined, but they expect it to give me a completely different type of error. But that's fine because it means that you have not used it, but you want to be able to you want to be able to use it even without defining it. So that's what no hoisting means. You can't use that variable before you declare it. You have to declare it, assign a value to it, then you can be able to access it at that particular point. I don't know. Actually, this is strange behavior. I was expecting the browser to complain with an accurate error method that says you cannot use this variable without instantiating it. So I just declared it, but I have not uh, assigned a value to it. So that way it means that it has nothing. It is unassigned. So that way I should not be able to use it at this particular point. All the same, that's not a big deal. So you can just carry on to the third element, which is not declaration. What that means is that you might not be able. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So what that means is that I cannot come down here again and say let city is equals to New York. Let city is equals to Los Angeles like that. You can see let. So you can see I cannot redeclare the city. This is the kind of error I was expecting on the first one. I cannot redeclare the city because it is already declared up here. So no redeclaration. But you can actually change the value. The parameter I forgot here is that you can update its value for you can update values. You can update the value, as you can see, age was blank, then I change it to 30, then that works. City was blank, then I can change the city without the keyword. This is just changing the name of the city, and that would work. So you can see it was initially undefined at this point. Then I change it to Los Angeles. Then when I declare it again, it becomes Los Angeles. So it means that you can actually change its value. So it's a block scope. It doesn't support hoisting. It does not support declaration. But of course, the fourth one is you can change its value. So you can update its value. So that is the second way of declaring variables. There is var, there is let. Then the third way you can declare variables in JavaScript is by using what we call const, like that. So const is a way you declare a constant value, something that you don't expect to change. So it's also a block scope is a block scope element, which means if you declare it within a function, it's only going to be accessible within that function. If you declare it um, uh, outside any function, then it's accessible throughout your entire document. So that's the beauty. Now, how is const different from var and let? One, it does not allow you to declare the variable, and it does not allow you to update or change the variable value. So two things that are very important. It's functional, it is function based, it has a function scope, and it's a block scope. It's block scope. It doesn't allow hoisting, it doesn't allow redeclaration, and you cannot change its value. So it's used for things that are constant, like VAT rate, which is always 16, or maybe the radius of a circle, the value of pi, which is 3.14, or something that you want to be constant, something you don't want to change the value. You can change the properties, but you can't change the value. So that's why we use const. So for const, it means that you declare a value, you assign it, And once you've assigned it, the value never changes. So it's more like a constant. Now, somebody would ask, why do I need to declare a variable as a constant? So many use case scenarios. A very good example is maybe when I want to access DOM components. Like say something like Robert here. Okay, where Robert is written, I come here, where Robert is written is actually here. You can see it's a span with an ID of name. So what I could do here, I could simply say uh, const name location is equals uh, document query selector. There you can see it's not element by ID. You can use get element by ID, but I like using query selector. Then I put the CSS selectors that I used to read. So this is an easier way of doing it if you ask me. Then now once I declare this, I don't expect this one to change anytime in the future. But if I wanted to change this name to something like maybe Mary Jane, I could simply say something like name location the text content is called John Doe. So you can see now I've updated it to John Doe, but I am accessing it here as a variable. I'm accessing it here as a variable. I don't need to do this over and over again. So that is a classical use case of why you'd want to declare a variable as a constant. So for the properties of const, just like um, let it has a block scope, which means variable declared within const blocks are within that block. There is no hoisting, which means you cannot use the variable without assigning it the value. There's no reassignment, which means you can't change its value. I can't come and say here name location is equals to, then I pick something new, something like that. So you'll see assignment to a constant variable. I cannot be able to assign a value to a constant variable, which is what is here. So I can't change that variable. And then of course you must initialize before you use it. So I can't come here and say const. Well, when I'm declaring it, I must give it a value. So that's what I must initialize the const variable at the time of declaration. So those are some of the properties. No reassignment, no hoisting, no declaration, assign value must be assigned at the declaration level. And of course, it's a block scope, which means if you declare a variable within it, then it's used within it. If you declare it outside it, then it can access things that are declared outside it, but are at the global level. So those are the three ways that we can define variables within JavaScript. Okay. Any question up to that point? So I remove this one to get rid of the error. So you can see I'm using a lot of comments left, right, and center. So just to explain or to enforce how comments are actually used. And if, in fact, in many cases, if you look at some programs, you'll find that they have more comments than actual code that is being executed. Okay. Any question on how to declare variables in JavaScript? I think that's pretty straightforward. All right. So we can look at something else. We can look at data types in JavaScript. So in JavaScript, we have two main categories of data types. A data type is basically the format, is the format for storing data in a variable. It is the format of storing data in a variable, and it defines the type of data that can be stored in a variable and the operations that can be performed on that data. So that is what a data type is: format for storing data, or basically the type of data that can be stored inside that variable. And there are two main categories of data types in JavaScript. One is what we call primitive data types. Primitive data types. So these are the basic data types in JavaScript. So they hold only one value at a time. Primitive in the sense that They don't have properties, they don't have methods, neither they have things like events. You can't trigger them. So something of the sort. So, and we have about 7 of them. We can discuss probably maybe 4. The rest you can look up on your own. So for primitive data types, we have what we call a string. Strings are chains of alphanumeric numbers like names of people, names of places, names of items, description of something. So a chain of alphanumeric characters is referred to as a string. We're going to see how that works out. Then you have numbers. Now in JavaScript, you have different types of numbers based on position, but number represents things that are numeric in nature, things that can be quantified, like, 10, 15, and all that. But of course, when it comes to numbers, we have precision. So in numbers, we have precision of up to the 2000, above the 2000, above a billion, above a trillion, above a quintillion. So when it comes to numbers, we have a very high precision and low precision depending on the kind of data you want to store, but all of them are numbers. Then you have Boolean data types. Boolean data types are the ones that represents true or false, 1 or 0. For example, I can ask you, are you a library member? It's either yes or no. I can ask you something like, would you like to eat? Yes or no, something of the sort. So when talking about that kind of data, that's a Boolean expression from just Ball, who actually came up with that kind of a thing. Then you have undefined. Undefined represents a variable that has been declared, but no value has been assigned to it. So whenever you get undefined type, it means that you declared a variable, but you never assigned a value to it. Null represents the intentional absence of any object within a variable. So sometimes we declare a variable and don't want it to store anything. Null and blank and 0 are not the same thing. Blank is a value, 0 is a value, null is no value. It's like vacuum. You see, vacuum and air are not the same thing. So when you say there's vacuum here, there is totally nothing. It's not air. There is nothing inside there. Air is something. So null is more like vacuum, so to speak, when it comes to programming. And it's very important because sometimes I want to have my variables containing null values so that now I can assign them the proper type of data that I want. So that's the first category of data types in JavaScript. The other one, of course, is objects, which you're going to discuss later. And objects can come in things like arrays or class objects, which we're going to discuss later. Probably you'll give me another time you're free, then we can discuss the object data types because we cannot be able to mix and match them within this particular class. But we're going to look at the primitive data types and see exactly how to use them. So let's see how to use the primitive data types. So let's start with strings, which is the first one. So end here. So for a string data type, mostly I'm not going to use var because I know it supports hoisting and there's redeclaration and reassignment. I'm interested in reassignment aspect of things only. So the hoisting part, I really don't like it because it gives your program a lot of logical errors as we move along. Right. So let's start with the string. As we said, a chain of alphanumeric characters um, that forms things like names of people, names of places, describe things here and there and stuff like that. Model numbers, anyway, when you mix alphanumeric characters, that is numbers and letters of the alphabet, you end up with a string. So we can say let first name here like that, and I can simply say here first name. Now, when you're declaring a string, you can either use single quotes or double quotes. So you can use single quote like that. Then you can log it. You see it puts here Alice. Then I can reassign it. I simply say first name is equals to. Now you can also use double quotes, but when you use double quotes, make sure that you actually use double quotes at the beginning and at the end. If you use single quote, use it at the beginning and at the end. So you have those two options for declaring uh, string variables, and that's how you can be able to use it. So as you can see, every string will be enclosed in either a single quote or a double quote, whatever you're comfortable. By the way, you can also use what we call a template string. I didn't need to declare this. Yeah, that's the correct thing now. So you can also use what we call a template string. So template string. So for template string, you do it like this. You simply say first name is equals to, then use the backticks. The backtick is the key before one. The key before one is a backtick, so I can simply say Harold, and I can go ahead and console.log first name. You can see still Harold, and that works out. So I can use single quote, double quote, or template string. The good thing with template string, as you're going to see in a while, is that it allows us to do so many other things rather than just assigning that variable name. But even in that particular case, it actually works out. Okay, so that's how we use the string data type. Let's look at the number data type. So when it comes to numbers, so I can say let here, let num1 is equals to 20. Then I can say num2 is equals to 10. Then I can let the sum is equals to num1 plus num2. So if I do that, you see the output becomes 30. The output becomes 30. So it means that I've taken 20 plus 10, stored in the sum, then output the sum over here. So this just shows you how that works out. And you can see in JavaScript, we don't really specify the type of data that we're using, because when you assign a value to data type, it automatically tries to detect how that works out. Now, sometimes this can work, sometimes it doesn't work, because it depends on, if I say 20A here, that will be a string plus a number. Then you can see now that does not work out. So, and by the way, I forgot to mention something very important in JavaScript. So, what is it complaining about? Well, I can't put like that, because then that would be not be a number, to be a string. So string must be enclosed in brackets like that. So if I did this, you can see I get 2010, because this is a string. And of course, if I'm adding a string to a number, I'll end up with a string. So that's something that you need to be very, very careful about when it comes to JavaScript. You see, when I put a quote, it means it's 20, but you see, a plus is supposed to be used for concatenation. So again, the other small things, as we are working through JavaScript, we're going to see are a bit of a problem within the language itself. Not uh, deal breakers, but just things you need to be able to understand how it actually works. So whenever you don't put quotations and you try to perform an operation like this, then it becomes okay. Okay. So that is number data types. Then we also have Boolean data types. Boolean is when we have true or false. So I can simply say let library member is equals to true. So when I console library membership, you can see it's actually true. So when I say here it's false, you see it says false. So whenever you're dealing with true false values, that's also a type of data that you can work with on JavaScript. Then we also have the undefined data type. So let x is x, just like that. Then when I try to console log x, of course I see undefined. We have seen that before. It means that x has been declared, no value has been assigned to x. Then that way, by this particular point, x is undefined. So if I give it a value here like x equals to Richard, then it's going to output Richard there as as the one says, no longer going to be undefined, it's going to be reached at that point. But of course, we're interested in undefined, and that's what we are looking for. All right. So, by the way, in JavaScript, the semicolon is not mandatory. Like in other programming languages, you can either put the semicolon after a statement or just omit it altogether. It will still be able to work without the semicolon at the end. All right. So let's look at now the null. So null means we are not storing anything to it. So you can simply say here, let y is equals to null. Then when you consult the log y, you see it's actually a null value. Null means it does not store anything. There's nothing there. It's vacuum, right? So, and if you add nothing to vacuum, what do you end up with? So if you say y plus x, what do you end up with? Not a number, because x is a number. X is not a number. As you can see, x is undefined and y is also null. So when you try to add them up, it tries to convert them to numbers and gets the error not to number, that kind of a thing. So again, you're going to look at those much later. So those are the types of data. Of course, we also have another two, which I'm not going to focus on for now, because primarily these are the five that we use the most when it comes to JavaScript. And I just want you to focus on the things that we use the most. Okay, so those are variables and those are data types, and I'm talking about specifically primitive data types, not object data types. So for primitive data types, there are these five categories, and I think I've explained how we can use them and what they do, what they store. So string will store a chain of alphanumeric characters, number will store number values, um, um, Boolean will store true false value, and define a variable that has been defined but no value assigned to it. And of course, null will assign nothing to your variable so that now you can be able to give it whatever it is that you want to give it. So that is data types. Any question up there? Any question up to there? Okay, let's look at something else called operators in JavaScript. Operators. So operators are the things that perform operations on variables. So the symbols that perform operations on variables are referred to as operators. Symbols that are used to perform operation on variables are called operands. And we have quite a number of operands. So we have what we call arithmetic operators. Arithmetic operators allow us to perform arithmetic operations just as you've seen over here, num1 plus num2. So in arithmetic operator, we have five main categories. So we have addition, subtraction, division, multiplication, and modulus. Of course, you have increment and decrement. We have increment and decrement, but that's story for another time. We're going to see when we look at control structures. So when it comes to operators, we have arithmetic operators which help us to perform mathematical or arithmetic operations to operands. And an example is what I've put up here. Sum equals to num1 plus num2. So it means that you're going to add those two numbers. If I wanted to minus them, I would say minus them. If I wanted to divide them or multiply them, I would divide or multiply. And that's basic mathematics, arithmetic. You are well aware of what that does. What I think is strange are the last three. The one is the fifth one is modulus. And what modulus does is it gives you the remainder of a number after dividing by another one. So I could say something like here, let uh, first num is equals to 10, then second num is equals to 5. Now, when I want to output the remainder of 5 divided by 10, what is the remainder of 5 divided by 10? What is the remainder of 5 divided by 10? Anyone? Yes, jog your memory. You can type in the message. What is 5 divided by 10? You guys don't know that? Or you can't hear me? What is 5 divided by 10? It is 2 remainder 0. 5 divided by 10 is 2 remainder, or rather 10 divided by 5. 10 divided by 5 is 2 remainder 0. Because 5 goes into 10 twice with no remainder. Now, modulus, what it means is that remainder after you divide a number by another one. So if I come here and simply say, let mod equals, of course, I'll do first number divided by second number, I'll get the output of 0. Because what will happen is I'll take 10 divided by 5, I get 2 remainder 0. But if I take 10 and I divide it by 7, what do I expect? I expect the result to be 3, which is true because 7 goes into 10 once time, but then it remains 3. So that way, it means that 10 mod 7, which is what is actually written here as the percentage sign, will give you the remainder after you divide a number by another one. Now, for the increments or this plus, it will basically increment a variable by 1. So what I could do here, I could declare let counter is equals to 1 or even 0. Let counter is equals to 0. Then here I can say counter plus plus. Then I consult the log counter. You realize that I am outputting 1. If I started at 1 or if I started at 10, it will increase to 11. So you can see the counter here just increment a number by 1. And of course, the reverse, which is the decrement, will decrease the number by 1. When I say counter minus minus, and I log it, so I'll start with 11 because 10 plus 1. Then I reduce, then I'll put 10 minus 1, so I'll get 10 and 11. So generally, that is the idea of how these arithmetic operators work. Any question up to that point? Any question up to that point? That's arithmetic operators, okay? We also have what we call assignment operators. So these are the ones that are used to assign values to variables. So they used to assign values to a variable. And we have seen one use case in action, the equal to sign here. It is used to assign value to a variable. So let's say we have something like and we have a let here a. When I say equal to, it means I'm assigning 5 to this variable called a. So a will always be having a value called 5 depending on how you're assigning. So that's one way of doing it. So that is one. Okay, I think I removed most of them. So there's that. So I'll give examples here. So these are the ones that are there. So you can use equal to sign is one of them. Now you can also use a variable. This is like saying if I wanted to say let b is equals to c, or maybe b is equals to say 10, then I want to say uh, c c is equals to a plus b. That is also assignment. But when I say let c is equals to 10 here, let me say c is equals to 7, then I want to add c to b. I can simply say c plus equals b. What will that give you? That will give you a value of 17 because c is 7 and b is 10. When you say c plus equals to, it means take the value of c and add it to B. So plus equal to, take the value that is here. So instead of saying C is equal to C plus B, you can actually say C is equal to C plus B, like this. So these two statements are actually the same. C is equal to C plus B and C plus equals to B, they mean exactly the same thing. So sometimes we opt to write the shorter code over here to make it more precise, and that's still be able to work out. The same applies to all the other arithmetic operators like subtraction, multiplication, division, and even modulus. So if I wanted to subtract C from A, I'll simply say C minus equals A. Then I can console the log, sorry, I can console the log C, and you'll see the value will be 12 because at this point, C is 17 and A is 5. So 17 minus 5 will give you definitely 12. So you can see how that is going. So these are the ones that we are referring to as arithmetic or assignment rather operators. We have assignment operators. Then you have another category of operator called comparison operators. And for comparison operators, they allow us to compare things. So you want to compare a few things, and examples are as listed here. So I have double equal to sign. I want to compare if things are the same. Triple equal to sign, I want to compare if things are the same and they contain the exact data type. So a very classic example is 10 here and 10, like that. So when I say console.log num, you can see this one will return true because this 10 and this 10, all of them are values 10, only that one is number and the other one is a string, but they are the same thing. So if I do the second one down here, which is triple two equal sign, you see it's false because the type of data here is number and the type of data here is string. So when I'm comparing type and value, which is triple equal to sign, which is this second one here, I am comparing both the value and the data type. And we can put the data type to see what they actually are from here. So console.log, and I'll say to get the data type, you use type of num3 and type of num4. So you see num3 is a number, num4 is actually a string. So if you're comparing number and string, when you're using triple to equal sign, it means that they're not the same because the data type is different. So even if the values were the same and the data type is different, then they will not be able to equate. They have to be exactly the same for the triple equal to sign to work. Sorry. Something like that. So now you can see all of them are number, and that now gives you true because the values are the same and the data type is also the same. But if I put here 100, of course, it will still give me false because now that this is 100 and this is 10, all of them are numbers, but this number is not equal to this number. That's why the triple two equal to sign is. So we have not equal to, we have greater than, we have less than, greater than equal to, less than equal to, and so on and so forth. So when it comes to comparison, you might want to compare things in that order. Is, for example, in this particular case, if I compare um, console.log and I say num3 is less than or equal to num4, so you'll see that should give me a true because num3 is 100, num3 is 10, num4 is 100, and 3 is less than or equal to num4. So that kind of a thing. So when it comes to comparison operator, they will be returning Boolean data types, but of course, depending on the comparison you're performing. Are they equal? Are they equal to in terms of data and data type? Are they not equal to one another? Are they not equal to one another based on content and data type? Are they greater? Is one greater than the other, and so forth and so forth. So that is where comparison operators comes in. Now we have another category of operators called logical operators. Logical operators are basically three, and they allow us to compare things based on some truth table. So you have a condition, and you want to compare two things and see whether they return true or not. So we have what we call and, or, and, not. So and is where we check if a condition is if both conditions are true. So we have done digital electronics, and you've done what we call the AND truth table. So it means that only when the two conditions, or only when all conditions are true, is only when it returns true. If either the condition is false, if either condition is false, then it returns false. For or, on the other hand, so long as any condition is true, it returns true. If all the conditions are false, then it returns false. And of course, not will just negate the value that you have. If the value is true, it will make it false, and vice versa. So those are the three logical operators that you have and that you can use in JavaScript. So I can have two conditions over here. So you can see when I say is student enrolled is true and is enrolled is student is true and is enrolled is true. When I console.log, when I use this double ampersand, it means that I'm checking if the first condition is true and if the last condition is also true. If all of them are true, then the output is true. So as you can see here, let me just put this on as true. So I'm expecting to see this first one as true. Student is enrolled. Okay, this is true. This should be true. Oh, I have some outputs here. Sorry, I think those are confusing me. Let me just mask them. Awesome. Yeah. So you can see the first condition is true because this is a student and they're also enrolled. But if I put this one is false, then you see it returns to false because one of the conditions, this one is not true. So long as there's a condition that is not true, then it will always return false. When it comes to or, it means that if either of the condition is true, then it returns true. So you can see student is false, but enrolled is true, but the output actually is true because I'm using either they are a student or they are enrolled. So in either situation, whether student or enrolled, that allows me to be able to return a true value. Not on the other one, we just negate what is there. So you can see student is here is set to false here. When I say not student, it will simply return it to true because this one is false. Not false is actually true. So these are the ones that we are referring to as logical operators. Those are logical operators. Then number 5, we have another category of operator called the ternary operator. Ternary operator basically allows you to perform actions depending on the condition of of, uh, of an operator. Like for example, I have a value that I want to test, and I want to execute code based on different portions of code based on whether the value is true or false. So that is basically what it is. So it's in short, it's more like writing an if-else statement, but in a shorthand format. So if this is true, then do this, otherwise do this. And a classic example that I've given here is you have uh, uh, age of 18 and cannot vote. So cannot vote will be true or false depending on the age. So cannot vote if the age is greater than or equal to 18, then yes, they can vote. Actually, let me just put them on separate lines so that you're able to see them. JavaScript does not care about white space. That's the good part, especially on things like ternary operators like this. That one will just work out well. So you can see can vote is a variable which we assign to. We check the condition. This is the condition. Age 18 here is the condition. Is age 1 greater than or equal to 18? If the answer is true, then it will execute this portion. If the answer is false, then it will output this portion. So what I could simply do, I can simply output they cannot vote here. So when I come here, you can see yes, they can vote because the age has been set to 18 and the condition is either 18 or above. But if I set 17 here, then you'll see that it goes and executes the other portion of code which is here. So you can see now it says no, you cannot be able to vote on that account. So that is actually how ternary operator works. It allows you to be able to execute two pieces of code. One, if the value is true, the other, if the value is actually false. That's what a ternary operator does. Then we have type operators, which I have explained here. Type operator allows us to be able to check the type of variables. So I think I explained here, yeah, I explained it here. So you can use it to check the type of variable. So when I say my variable is hello world and I say console the type of my variable, you can see that it puts a string. This is important, especially when you're working with large application and you want to check what kind of data was returned by a variable or was assigned to a variable and that kind of thing, when you are debugging your application, it becomes very, very useful point. So that's the type operator. Now, we have another operator called the I don't want to use bitwise operators because I think I'll leave the operators at that because the most that we're going to use are assignment, comparison, logical, and ternary. So yes, we have bitwise operators, another type of operator, but I'll not focus on them because I think they are beyond the scope of this class. All right, perfect. So let's look at something else called control structures. Control structures. Um, 0.5. Somebody was also, oh, okay. Sometimes when I'm switch on to the other screen, you need to be able to use your mic to answer. Otherwise, I'm not consistently looking at the other screen, so I might not see you answer. But okay, that's fine. Now, control structures. What are control structures? Ideally, programs are meant to execute from top to bottom. So you execute a program from the first line all the way to the last line. That's how programs are designed to work. But control structures, on the other hand, are used to control the flow or execution of your program. And that's very important because sometimes you want to execute your portion of the program based on some conditions. Sometimes you want to repeat, sometimes you want to do different things. You want to jump from one point to another, and those can naturally not execute from top to bottom in a linear way, so to speak. That is very, very important. So, and that now brings us to the other uh, element of control structures. Now, in programming, we have four main categories of control structures. So I'm going to execute them. I'm going to explain them one by one. So the first category is what we call selection. Selection. So selection statements are the ones that decide what portion of code is going to execute based on a given condition. And a very classic example is the if statement. So if statement will execute a code block of a specified code segment depending on some condition. So I have a variable here called let number is 5, and I'm saying 5 is always greater than 5, then output the number is greater than 5. So if I come back to my log here, you'll see the number is greater than 5. And if I put any number that's greater than that is greater than 5 here, that will always return true. What will happen if I put a number that's less than 5? You can see from the console, there's literally nothing going on there. So that becomes a bit of a problem. So there's the if statement, then we have the if then else statement. So the if else statement, and if else statement now will give us two parts. The first part is if this condition is true, then do this, otherwise do that. You can see this first if statement does not give us the other part. So it only tells us if the number is greater than 5, then do this. So this will only ever execute when the number is greater than 5. If the number is ever going to be less than 5, then there is no instruction that was given for such. That is one way you could tackle code. The other way is you could tackle code where I have two conditions. If this condition is true, then do this, otherwise do this other thing. So that is called the if-else statement. That's the difference between if statement and if-else statement. So for if-else statement, sorry, I can declare a variable here. I can use the same example I had above, but use different values. I think I typed this before. So I'll say number is 6. Then you can see when I say if number 6 is greater than 5, then output this. Otherwise, output this other portion. So it has two conditions. If number 6 is greater than 5, consider this part. Otherwise, consider this other part. For the other one, I was only considering one part. If number is greater than 5, consider this part. If it's less than 5, don't do anything. So that's the difference. So as you can see here, number 6 is not greater than 5 because I've assigned 3 to it. But if I assign 10 to it, it's going to give me the first one, which is greater than 5, as you can see. If I put 2, it's going to give me less than, which is here, not greater than. So you can see that is how then if how if else works. We have if then you have if then else. And of course, you also have nested ifs. So you can nest a lot of ifs inside one another, depending on what you want to check. Because you might want to check condition 1, then condition 2, then condition 3, then condition 4, all of them independently, not merged together with a logical operator like AND. So you can merge them with AND, but sometimes when you want to just measure them one by one after the other, so that you can be able to tell the user what the issue actually is, then you might use avoid using the comparison, the logical operators. So this one implementation of control structure as far as the selection is concerned. Let's look at another implementation of control structure, which is what we call uh, switch. Switch. Switch statements will execute a different code block based on the instructions that are available. So as you can see over here, I will execute based on the value available. So for switch, what it means is that you want to have one variable, but you can test it for multiple values. So for example, I might ask, which country are you coming from? So if it is Kenya, I do this. Uganda, I do this. Tanzania, I do this. Cameroon, I do this, and so on and so on. But you can see I'm only testing for one value, which is the country of origin. So that it's still going to execute based on the country of origin, but the format of writing is going to be a bit different. So I could use something like this. I don't know if it's going to give you that example because that's what I had used before when I was preparing my material. Let me see if that's going to work out. I was going to say let country is equals to Kenya. Then I use switch. If country is equals to Kenya, then what do you want me to do? I'll output that. Sorry, I'm just doing the code that I had written back so that now I don't have to type a lot of it. So if country is close to Kenya, I'll say you come from Kenya. If country is Uganda, I say you come from Uganda. And now, when it comes to switch, you can see every time I have executed a portion of code, I need to break. Every time I've executed a portion of code, I need to break. Otherwise, if I don't put break, it's going to test the other condition. If I don't put break, it's going to test the other condition. So if it's Kenya, I'll put that. Uganda, I'll put that. If it's not Kenya or Uganda, then I will put this third portion over here. So that's kind of like how switch works. So you have one variable, but you're testing for multiple values. So you can see here you're from Kenya. If I put here South Africa, I'll say you're not from Kenya or Uganda, something of that sort. So that is actually how switch works. And of course, with switch, as I've said, you must make sure that you put break. Otherwise, you don't put break, what it will do is it's going to execute the next portion of code and so on and so forth. So that is control structures. That is selection control structures. So you want to execute code block based on certain statements or certain conditions, and you can use if then statement, you can use if then else statement, you can also use switch statement. Of course, you can also use ternary operator, as you can see over here, when you only have two options to execute, true or false. So again, when it comes to selection, those are the implementations that you can be able to use when it comes to selection control structures. I hope you can still be able to hear me. Can you? Can you still be able to hear me? Or I lost you? Let me know so that I know I'm not talking to myself. Anybody in the house, or I lost you guys? Okay, Patrick says you can hear me. That's fine. Okay, that's awesome. Let's look at the second category of control structures, which is what we call iteration or loops or repetition. So some people call them loops, some people call them iteration, some people call them repetition. Sorry, repetition. All these things mean the same thing. So for most programs, the second category of control structures you have is loops or iteration or repetition. You want to execute a given code segment multiple times or maybe sorry until a condition is met. Either way. And that's where it becomes very interesting. So there are a couple of uh, implementation you can have for iteration or looping. Of course, the most common one is a for loop. The most common is a for loop. So for a for loop, it executes a code block a given number of times. So let me say I want to output numbers 1 to 5 or numbers from 0 to 4. I mean, starting at 0 and of course ending at 4, those are 5 numbers. So I can declare a variable I is equals to 0. So I'll say for, because actually that's the example that I had used before. I'll simply say for let I is equals to 1 to 5. So what this code means for, then the 4 has to be inside the bracket. Then my initial value is I is equals to 0. Then my condition should be I is less than 5. Then I'm incrementing by 1. So we learned about decrement. So repeat the following code segment. The code that is inside here, this one, is going to repeat it this way. I is starting at 0, so it starts at 0. So long as I is less than 5, so it will continue doing it until I reaches 5. Then increment I by 1. So it means I start at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. By the time I'm reaching 5, 5 is greater than 5. Then I stop at that point. So you can see here, I will put 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 because I start at 0 and I end at when I is greater than 5. That is a classic loop that you could be able to use. So you can use that. Of course, you're going to look at object data types and you're going to see how the for loop still works. We can also look at the while loop, and the while loop will just do the same thing as a for loop does. The only thing is that now I'll say while j is less than 5 with the following. So the only difference between while and for is that for while I have to initialize my counter, then I have to test for the condition. So while j is less than 5, I have to output my value, then do perform an increment inside the while loop. You can see for the for loop, I can do everything on a single line. They are treated as parameters. For a while loop, I have to initialize my variable outside it, then test, put my test condition inside the while. Then after I do my test, I manually increment y I increment the counter so that now it's able to output for me the next. So that's another classic example of how we can use repetition. Then you also have do while. We also have do while loop. So in a do while loop, the difference between a do while loop and a while loop is that a do while loop must execute at least once. While might not execute. So for example, even before I go here, if I put here 10, you're never going to have any output here. You can see this 1, 2, 3, 4 is actually this. So for a while loop, if this condition is already more than what you're testing, it will never execute this portion of code. But for do while, the code must execute at least once. So it will depend on what you intend to use that particular code for. If you want it to execute at least once, then you test the condition, then use a do while loop. So I can say let k equals to 0. Then here, I will say do the following. So it's the same as while as you can see over here, but it's just do. Then the while is outside. The condition is tested outside. So even if I start at 10 here, at least it must output one value of k, which is this here, before it increments and tests. So that's the difference between loop, do while, and between while loop. Those are the three main implementation when it comes to loops and iteration. Okay, loops and iteration. Then the third category of control structures we have in JavaScript are what we are calling the jump statements. That is break and continue. So the jump statements allow you to alter the general flow of the execution, jumping to a different part of the code. For example, will include the break and also the um, break and also the continue statement. So let me just explain here. Since I written this code before, I think it's not there's no point of me typing the code again. So I'll just use what I had written before to make it easier. I'll just explain it. I'll just explain what it means. So I'm saying I'm using a regular for loop, and I'm saying for let I starting at 0 and I for me for the counter m starting at 0, and so long as the counter m is less than 10, incrementing the m by 1, I check if m is equals to 5, break. Break means execute the current loop and continue with the next. So what you're going to have actually, break means stop at that level. Break means stop completely. Break means stop completely. So if m reaches 5, it stops executing this loop. You can see initially I was able to execute this loop from top to bottom, but here I'm saying execute this loop from top to bottom, but if this condition prevails, then break the loop, which means it will jump here and execute whatever follows the loop. Okay? So as you can see, I'll mask these ones so you can be able to see clearly. Sorry. So you can see it's just going to output 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it means 0, 1, 2. By the time it reaches 5, it will come and break and only execute the code that follows the break. That is how break works. It will stop execution of the current code, go and execute the code that follows the uh, the loop that comes after the loop. Then you have the continue statement. And the continue statement, the only thing it's going to do is that it will break the current it will skip the current iteration, then continue with the other one. So if I mask this one like that, you can see what it will do here. It will execute. What is it? What does it want now? Okay, sorry. So what it will do is it will start counting from 0 to 10, incrementing by 1. But when it reaches 5, it will jump 5, then continue to 6, 7, 8, and 9, as you can see over here. So 0, when it reaches 5, it does not output anything because the issue should be outputting the current number. So it will not output 5, but then, of course, it continues 6, 7, 8, 9, all the way to where you would like to go and stuff like that. Okay? So those are now what you call the jump statement. That is break and continue. Break will stop execution of the current loop based on the condition that has been mentioned. Continue will only skip the current loop and continue with the rest of the loop. Okay, so that's very, very important, especially when you're dealing with data and you're filtering data, or you want to perform operations on things like printing data or doing row labeling or things like that. These are very, very useful functions for that kind of a thing, right? So that is how we use the control structures in JavaScript. Now, another a lot to take in. That is quite a lot to take in. So I think what I will do is I'll give you a short break. I'll make sure I give you this notes, this recording that I have. You look at it, then you tell me when you can be available so I can look at functions and object data types, which are which are also a very finite part of JavaScript. Now, with all that in place, now you can be able to create as an interactive program as you'd like to. I will show you how to create one simple project of an address book from start to finish, or even a calculator. Actually, I think we can do a calculator so that you see exactly how now we put everything together in terms of creating the UI, applying the CSS, and of course, putting JavaScript into action and seeing how all these things work together. Just a simple address book or calculator application to demonstrate this functionality. But I'll give you a break at this point. You absorb what we have done, especially as far as CSS is concerned. What is it? What can it do? What versions are there? why do we use it, how do we use it in terms of outputting variables and adding it to our files like external files or internal scripts. We also looked at comments, we have looked at variables, which is let, const, and var. I think we also looked at the data types and specifically primitive data types and what they are. We have looked at operators. We have also looked at control structures. And these are very, very important aspects of JavaScript as a programming language. So just take your time, go through the video more than once. If you have to, you can do further research over the internet to see how they work out. Then that way you'll be able to write programs very effectively. You will now be able to give life to our applications that now it is capable of doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Any question up to that point? I know it's almost 2 hours since we started. I know it's not a short order; it's a tall order. Uh, Especially when you are doing a lot of stuff. But yeah, that is basically what it is. And as you can see, JavaScript plays a very important role because once you create a user interface and you style it, then it comes and gives it animation. You can do several things with it, change position of the page, perform calculations on the screen, and do all those kind of things, which you're going to see. But of course, I had to start with the principle so that you understand how the principle actually works. Question or comment? Any question or comment? Okay, if there's none, then I think I'll take a break at that. I'll share this for your review. You can go through it over and over again until just make sure that you get all the concepts right. Then when we meet again, I'll talk to your class rep. They'll tell me we have an exam from next week on Monday, so we have to finish this week. Uh, yeah, so you tell me when you're supposed to, when you're available, then I can take some time and see how to complete this. All right. Okay, so if there's no question, I think I'll take a break at that. I'll talk to your class rep in terms of how to get this and when you guys can be available again. Have a wonderful afternoon.